All right, guys, I have another video for you guys. This time it's going to be concerning Tony Evans. Tony Evans is probably is one of the more popular preachers and author and writer and so forth. And most recently, he spoke at the SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention, that took place in Anaheim, California. And in so doing so, he used an analogy of the Trinity that I thought was a little bit concerning. And so with the doctrine of the Trinity, we want to be very careful of the analogies we use to explain the Trinity, because a lot of the times the analogies we use fall short of actually properly defining the Trinity. So we want to be very careful when we jump into defining the Trinity. I know the temptation is to try to define it in a manner that makes it easier for the average reader or the layman to understand, even the scholarly, the academic to understand. But every time we use these analogies, they seem to fall short. One analogy that people like to use is the water vapor or steam, water droplet, and then ice. Three different phases of H2O. We like to use that type of analogy, but the reason that analogy falls short is because it doesn't make distinctions between the persons. That analogy falls short also because it doesn't allow for the personhoods. It doesn't allow for that, and it doesn't allow for 3 in 1, and that water, vapor, and ice cannot exist independently of its own. They're all a product of H2O. So that analogy falls short. Another analogy that likes to be used concerning the Trinity is the 3-leaf clover. The 3-leaf clover has the 3 parts to a clover, right? So a lot of people like to use that to try to say, oh, see, this is the distinction of the Trinity. This is how we define the Trinity, or a good analogy of the Trinity. The problem with that one, and the reason it falls short, is because it's 3. It's 3, but it doesn't say 3 in 1. And so if I take a leaf of the clover, now I have 1/3 of the Trinity. If I take another leaf, now I have 2/3 of the Trinity gone. The understanding is that God is God in one, no matter what. He is one God. It's not 3 parts. They're not made of parts. There is no such thing as tritheism. That's another deal that can get concluded out of having the clover analogy. Another analogy that likes to be taught concerning the Trinity is the egg analogy. You got the shell, you got the egg white, and you got the yolk itself, the egg yolk itself. And the reason that this analogy doesn't hold strong and it fails is because the shell and the egg yolk and the egg white and the yolk are made of 3 distinct substances. All right, so they're not the same substance. They're not the same exact thing. We know with the Trinity, the Godhead, the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit are all one nature and one essence. They are not made of different substances. They're not made of different natures, and they're not made of different essences. So the egg analogy fails, and what can happen with this analogy is that it can fall into the era of tritheism, where you have 3 different persons. They're not sharing the same nature or the same essence. They're not sharing it at all, but they have their own distinct nature, their own distinct essence. So this egg analogy falls into tritheism. That's why you should veer away and fall away from using the egg analogy. And so I have a video of Tony Evans, and he uses an analogy which is the pretzel analogy. I'm going to go into that video, but before I go into that video, I do want to encourage you to go ahead and like and follow the God's Truth. Hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you can stay in the loop what the God's Truth has going on. Be sure to do that because you don't want to miss out on any of these shows that are coming up here on the Gospel Truth. With that said, I'm going to play this video, and so we're going to hear the pretzel analogy from Tony Evans. Okay, so let's listen up.
1 Peter 3:7 says, if the husband and wife are in discord, the prayers of the husband are hindered. Where there is illegitimate disunity, God will not respond because of his unified Trinitarian nature. One God composed of 3 co-equal persons who is one in essence while being distinct in personhood, like a pretzel with 3 holes. The first hole is not the second hole is not the third hole, but they all tie together by the same dough. Divine nature. When God cannot be involved and be himself, the unified person that he is, his presence, glory, power, and provision will not be felt in that context.
All right, so we see the analogy that Tony, I think it's a Dr. Tony Evans, I believe it is, that Tony Evans uses for his analogy as a Trinity. And so this analogy, the pretzel analogy that he used, fails because it falls into the same issues with the egg analogy. If you remember, the egg analogy goes with the shell, the egg white, and the yolk, while, and people would say that that is a good analogy of the Trinity because it's one egg, right? It makes up one egg. The problem is, once again, is that the egg is a different substance. The yolk is a different substance, and the egg white is a different substance. So therefore, with the Trinity, once again, they are one in the same essence and nature. So there's no substance differences, and so it could be broken down into thirds. And so also with the analogy of the pretzel for the Trinity, that can be broken down into thirds. So you don't want to be able to say that, oh yeah, we could take one whole away, and then it'd be a third. It'd be a third of the Trinity gone, and then the second pretzel and the second part of the pretzel can be removed, and that's a 2/3 of the Trinity gone. No, the proper definition of the Trinity are co-equal, co-eternal. So it's not this idea of tritheism where there are different parts to the Trinity. They're not made up of parts, they are one whole. So these analogies of the Trinity all fail. And so the natural question is that how should we define the Trinity, and where should we stop at? Where should we just stop there? Just don't even go with analogies. Well, I would say Dr. James White's definition of the Trinity is a good one, and it says within the one being that is God, there exists eternally three co-equal, co-eternal persons, namely the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Full stop. And you can find this definition in his Dr. James White title, The Forgotten Trinity, and that should be full stop there. I'm not one to like to use analogies because all analogies fall short when it comes to defining the Trinity, and so we should be very careful in the way that we define the Trinity and the way that we use analogies. My recommendation to anyone out there that's looking for a way to define the Trinity, to make it easy for whoever they're trying to explain it to make it easy even for themselves to understand, is that don't even try it. Don't even try to use an analogy because all analogies fall short. And so we should rely on the scriptures for the proper definition of the Trinity. And there is a level of mystery to the Trinity. So for us to attempt to try to make it some easy way of understanding the Trinity, we are not able to, because we have to allow for that mystery that comes with the understanding of the Trinity. So I just wanted to do this video just to give people an awareness of bad analogies as it concerns the Trinity. So my recommendation would be not to use analogies for the Trinity. Just allow the biblical text to define the Trinity, and let's be satisfied with that. I hope this video was helpful for you, and I thank you once again for viewing this video. If you appreciate this video and you thought this video was very satisfying, why don't you support the ministry by giving the ministry a subscribe and hit that notification bell. It would be so great for you to become a subscriber to the Gospel Truth. With that said, I thank you, and may God bless you.